We've been covering a lot of the Capitol Hill machinations about what the next economic stimulus might look like. But we got an important insight into what the American people would like to see in the next stimulus bill, something that is apparently not weighing too heavily on the minds of the people here, but we thought we'd bring it to you. Okay, so this is a poll of Kentucky voters. Of course, Kentucky is the state represented by Mitch McConnell, majority leader, who has quite a bit of leverage and influence in terms of these negotiations. And they find that overwhelmingly, Kentucky voters back massive amounts of aid, especially to state and local governments. So Democrats have proposed $1 trillion to go to state and local governments to help them shore up their budgets so that they can continue to employ people, continue to provide services, all the things that they need to do. 65% of Kentucky voters support that proposal versus only 21% who do not support it. And Mitch McConnell, at least so far, has been on the side of that 21% minority in Kentucky that is not in favor. He called it like a blue state bailout. Now, he seems to have maybe softened his position on this. We don't know exactly what he's going to do in terms of state and local aid. We haven't gotten those numbers yet. But the voters are very much on the side of let's help out our state and local governments.
It's very noteworthy that McConnell, he's just been back in Kentucky now a couple of weeks before he came here. And a lot of the headlines were McConnell breaks from Trump en masse. McConnell says we're going to take this seriously. McConnell, he's also up for re-election, right? And even though he's probably going to beat Amy McGrath, he still has to shore up his base.
Just to think about it.
He's got to make sure that he's at least okay to try and win by 10 to 15 points. So who knows? Maybe the fact that we have a swing is more of a working class state as the Senate majority leader might actually benefit us all. The problem, though, is McConnell is facing basically a revolt within his caucus. I covered this earlier in my radar. But here's the Senate Budget Committee Chairman, Mike Enzi, yesterday on the Senate floor, talking about debt and deficits and how crazy inflation is going to be, how we shouldn't spend too much money. Saw the same thing from Rand Paul. We could throw the Rand Paul thing up there on the screen, who emerged from the caucus and was like, this is a bunch of progressive Bernie bros because they want to spend money. I mean, what a ridiculous thing to say. However, the state of the negotiations right now, it's not as bad necessarily as I thought it would be, but it's still bad. So right now, I mean, we've been against the payroll tax cut, right? Because if you have a payroll tax cut, it's not even going to benefit you if you're unemployed.
Right.
However, most of the Republican caucus is against it, not because of that reason, but because it would inflate the deficit, right? By $600 billion.
They don't like the spending. Yeah.
They don't like the spending. They don't like the lost revenue. So what else is in here? We know that there's an approximate $1 trillion cap. We also know, and this is probably the most important thing for the state of our economy, is on unemployment, which is that they have said they're willing to extend the unemployment benefit plus up. Right now it's at $600 per week. They're thinking through negotiations, it's probably going to end up around $300 or $400. Now that is very significant because that is a huge percentage drop in the amount of income that many millions of Americans are going to be receiving now over the next couple of years or the next couple of months. That percentage drop in income can generally be correlated, remember, according to that chart that we showed you yesterday, with the number of consumer spending in the economy, which is floating everything. So they have done the worst thing, in my view, which is not make up that lost income. A one-time $1,200 check, which they're contemplating right now, I think it's great. I also think it probably should have passed many times over the last 4 months, but it's not enough in order to make up that deficit.
Yeah.
And I really fear we're not pumping enough into the hands of actual consumers.
One of the biggest problems, too, with the whole approach, and this is all done for political reasons, is that none of it is tied to economic and budgetary triggers. So there's no, like, it automatically gets renewed. There's no automatic renewals for any of these programs. So you have to continue going back to Mitch McConnell and Rand Paul and Mike Enzi and trying to convince these people to do something again, rather than obviously what should have been done at the beginning is you're going to get $1,200 every month until this thing is over. And here are the metrics by which we're going to measure that. You're going to get unemployment with the plus up and extend that program until this thing is over. And here are the metrics by which we measure that. Now, why why don't politicians do that? And it's not just in this crisis. There's a reason why the minimum wage, for example, should be tied to inflation, should be automatically adjusted to reflect cost of living increases. They don't do it because they like it as an issue.
Yes.
They like to be able to go out there and posture and show, oh, look what we did, and to have something to use to bargain and leverage with. They like to play games that way with your life, providing you with no visibility, with no ability to know, what you're going to have in your pocket this month, because they find it politically beneficial for themselves. So where we are with the unemployment, which you're right to point to as one of the most critical programs that they have passed during the stimulus. And look, we have our criticisms of how this thing is structured, but in terms of what was done, it was the most helpful thing. That expires this week.
That's right.
No one has any hope. No, the thing is definitely 100% not going to pass this week. So you're going to have potentially weeks where people go without getting that plus up. That is a massive drop in income.
Yes.
You're going to have people immediately cutting back because they don't know. Look, maybe it's going to end up $300, $400 once they actually get around to passing something, but they don't know what's coming. So they're going to start pulling back and saving and try to make sure that they're going to be able to weather this storm. That sort of instability and lack of predictability has been one of the worst aspects of how this whole thing has been handled. By the way, one other note from this Kentucky poll, which is an interesting contrast. So Kentucky, as you probably know, because I obsessively talk about the state here, has a Democratic governor named Andy Beshear, who has done, by all accounts, like a solid job of handling the crisis. He's done briefings all the time. He's been aggressive about telling people to wear masks. He has quite a good approval rating in the relatively conservative state of Kentucky. 54% approve, 35% disapprove.
Wow.
Let's look at Mitch McConnell on the other hand. McConnell, and this is again in the same Kentucky poll, 40% approve, 48% disapprove.
Wow.
So completely underwater, the absolute reverse of the Democratic governor here, which again goes to underscore something we've been talking about, which is that yes, we live in a divided country. Yes, people have their partisan loyalties. Yes, we see that play out in a million ways. But people are also paying attention. They are also thinking. They are also evaluating how these policies affect them and their lives and their family and what they can do every single day. They are paying attention and they are not stupid.
No, they're certainly not. And I think that at least McConnell seems to understand that. But the rest of the GOP just doesn't. I mean, I think that is going to I think the fiscal conservatives right now have the most amount of power in Washington. They're the ones who are driving and pushing back against the already inadequate benchmarks set by the White House and saying, no, that's not enough. McConnell is out there. McConnell right now is to the left of the Republican caucus in terms of what is being proposed here.
Which is
and the groups that he has to appease and stop are Mike Enzi, Ted Cruz, Paul Ryan. For every, Josh Hawley and Cory Gardner and Susan Collins over here, there are several more of their colleagues over here on the right demanding that we cut more spending. Those are the most powerful people in Washington. And frankly, they're the enemies to the progress of us all.
Right.
We have to be honest here. Those are the people who have the power right now. They are the ones who are going as hard as they possibly can not to spend money. And this is another word on the state and local thing, because I looked at this. And the GOP objection to this is not incorrect, which is that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and many other big donor Democrats like, Bob Menendez and other, they're pushing for state and local bailouts because they have pension systems like in California and New Jersey, which are going to go bankrupt, right? And they want those things to get bailed out at the expense of the federal government. Now, it's not wrong to say that they mismanage their pension funds and all this. Am I the only one who's crazy and is like, well, is there a way that we could structure federal aid to states and locals saying all the money has to be conditionally spent on rehiring people and you can't spend it on your pension fund?
Yeah.
Why is that so difficult? Why can't you just do that?
By the way, Kentucky also has a massive pension issue. And it's complicated. I mean, some places mismanagement, it's a complicated issue, but never forget that the people who benefit from those pensions are the workers to whom that money is owed. So, I am fully in favor of making sure that those workers are made whole. But if you want to deal with that issue later and just focus on keeping the payrolls at this point, that would be a reasonable position to take. I think McConnell, because, Rand Paul, let's point out, also from the state of Kentucky, right? Obviously has a very different take. I
don't know how this guy makes it.
Very different take on this whole situation. McConnell, though, I'm not a fan of this man, but he is a very smart individual and very tactically intelligent, and he knows he's in deep jeopardy of losing his majority right now. So he is actually listening to the concerns of the Cory Gardners of the world, and Joni Ernst, who's now in danger, Susan Collins, who's very much in peril at this point in the election, and other vulnerable Republicans. And so that's why I think he is coming down where he is. It's certainly not what his ideology would dictate, but he at least is in touch somewhat with the reality of these swing state Republicans and the fact that, you know what, if you let people wither on the vine and the economy completely collapse, it's going to be really ugly for you this fall, and you are not going to be a majority leader anymore.
That is right. All right.
More Rising for you after this.